Let's go Dolphins! Something is happening behind the scenes that could completely change the conversation around the Miami Dolphins offense heading into training camp. While most fans are focused on the big names and the players already on the roster, there's another situation developing that very few people are talking about. And if the reports continue moving in the direction they're moving right now, Miami could have an opportunity to add a player that many people aren't paying enough attention to. What's fascinating is that this isn't about making a blockbuster move. This isn't about spending massive draft capital. It's about identifying value before everyone else does. The Dolphins have been evaluating their roster throughout the offseason, but some of the feedback coming out of early workouts has raised important questions. Could the front office already be exploring ways to strengthen the receiver room before training camp arrives? And if they are, one name continues to generate more buzz every single day. What I'm about to share might surprise a lot of Dolphins fans because the potential target comes from a place that nobody expected. The more information that emerges, the more this story starts feeling like something Miami cannot afford to ignore. But before we dive into all the details, make sure you've already smashed the like button if you believe the Dolphins are building something special for 2026. Let's show how strong this fan base really is. And I want to hear from the most optimistic Dolphins fans in the world. Drop this comment right now. Go Dolphins! The best is yet to come. Now let's get into everything that's happening and why this potential move is generating so much discussion among Dolphins fans. The interesting part is that Miami did invest in the position during the draft. The team added Caleb Douglas, Chris Bell, and Kevin Coleman Jr. However, despite those additions, there are still questions surrounding the overall depth and reliability of the room. The veteran options have not generated much excitement during the early offseason period, while Malik Washington has reportedly been one of the few receivers creating significant buzz. That reality has fueled speculation that Miami may not be finished looking for help at the position. This is where Bout enters the discussion. At only 24 years old, Bout is still a relatively young player despite already feeling like someone who has been in the spotlight for years. His journey has been unusual. He entered the NFL with major expectations after being considered a highly regarded prospect coming out of LSU. At one point, he was projected as a first-round talent before a disappointing final college season and other concerns caused him to slide in the draft. New England eventually selected him in the 6th round, and according to the information presented, that selection turned into a very valuable investment for the Patriots. What makes this story even more compelling is what Bout accomplished during the 2025 season. He became one of Drake May's preferred targets, particularly on deep throws. The numbers highlighted are difficult to ignore: 6 touchdowns, an extremely low drop percentage, and an impressive average of 16.7 yards per reception. Those are not statistics that belong to a player simply filling out a roster. Those are the numbers of someone who consistently made impactful plays when given opportunities. And here's where things start getting really interesting. Despite the production, multiple signals suggest that Bout's future in New England may be uncertain. Reports referenced in the material indicate that Patriots observers believe a trade could be coming. The reasoning is simple: New England's receiver room appears crowded, and there's a growing belief that Bout could become expendable if the organization continues pursuing upgrades at the position. Several names were mentioned as part of the Patriots' wide receiver situation, creating a scenario where Bout may struggle to find consistent opportunities moving forward. If that happens, should Miami make a move? The argument presented is that Bout would not need to arrive as a superstar. He would not need to become the centerpiece of the offense. Instead, he could provide something the Dolphins may currently lack: a proven vertical threat capable of winning downfield and making contested catches. His advanced metrics paint the picture of a receiver who maximized his opportunities. Among the statistics highlighted were strong contested catch numbers, elite efficiency on deep targets, and exceptional performance when the ball was thrown 20 or more yards downfield. In several categories involving deep passing, Bout ranked among the best receivers in football. Another point that makes this discussion fascinating is the potential cost. The information suggests that Bout's trade value could be in the range of a 5th or 6th round pick. If that estimate proves accurate, Miami would potentially have an opportunity to acquire a productive young receiver without sacrificing premium draft capital. Considering the concerns that have surrounded the receiver room during off-season workouts, that possibility becomes difficult to dismiss. But there's another layer to this story that should grab every Dolphins fan's attention. The report mentions that Bout has not been participating in Patriots OTAs. While those sessions are voluntary, his absence has only intensified speculation about a possible separation between player and team. Add that to the growing trade rumors, and suddenly this is no longer just a hypothetical discussion. There are real signs that movement could eventually happen. What makes the situation even more intriguing is that Miami would potentially be negotiating with a division rival. Historically, those types of trades often create hesitation. Yet recent NFL history has shown that divisional trades happen more frequently than many fans expect. The possibility cannot simply be dismissed because of the rivalry factor alone. And that brings us to the biggest question of all. The possibility becomes even more intriguing when you start looking at what Miami could realistically gain compared to what they would potentially give up. That is where the discussion starts shifting from a simple rumor to something that could genuinely make sense if the front office is evaluating every available option before training camp begins. According to the information presented, Bout would not require a massive investment. We're not talking about surrendering premium draft assets or making a blockbuster move that reshapes the future of the franchise. Instead, the estimated compensation could be a 5th or 6th round pick, which significantly changes the risk-reward calculation. Think about the situation from Miami's perspective. The Dolphins are trying to gather as much information as possible about the players currently competing for roster spots. They have young receivers developing, veterans trying to establish themselves, and a coaching staff attempting to determine who can consistently contribute once the season arrives. But what happens if those evaluations continue producing mixed results? What happens if the concerns surrounding the position remain present throughout minicamp and into training camp? That's when a player like Bout becomes particularly attractive because he already has NFL production on his resume. What stands out most is the type of production he brings. The data highlighted throughout the report repeatedly points to one specific strength, his effectiveness on deep passes. This is not a receiver whose value comes primarily from short catches and yards after the catch. In fact, some of his limitations were openly acknowledged. The report notes that he is not considered an elite route runner, nor is he known for generating huge numbers after the reception. But despite those limitations, his ability to win vertically continued to show up in the numbers. That is why several of the advanced metrics become so important. Among qualified receivers, Bout reportedly excelled when targeted deep down the field. His completion percentage on those throws stood out. His quarterback rating when targeted stood out. His drop numbers stood out. Even his contested catch success on deep targets placed him among the league's better performers in that area. When multiple categories begin telling the same story, it becomes harder to dismiss the production as a fluke. And then there are the efficiency metrics. One of the most eye-opening statistics mentioned was his catch percentage over expected. The explanation provided was simple. Bout consistently caught passes that, based on league averages, many receivers would not be expected to secure. That speaks to body control, concentration, and the ability to make difficult plays in competitive situations. The report also referenced his expected points added per target, placing him among some of the NFL's most productive receivers when opportunities came his way. Now, does that automatically mean you would become a star in Miami? No, and that's an important distinction. The argument being made is not that Bout would arrive and instantly transform the offense. The argument is that he could become an extremely valuable complementary piece. A player who understands his role. A player who could stretch defenses vertically. A player who can make life easier on the quarterback when opportunity